And a very good evening to you. Welcome to Politics 101, our Tuesday evening edition, kicking off our week. And those of you who have already joined us, welcome. Please do as we would normally do, and that is to let everyone know that we are on. Share the link. Welcome to you if you wherever you're joining us from, whether it's in Guyana, the wider Caribbean, the diaspora, as we say, in those of you who are in Brooklyn, New York, a special good evening to you. Those of you who join us from London, England, Bacchanal, in, as the Trinidadians would say, Bacchanal in England. Good evening, Regana. You're there. The Prime Minister is barely 6 weeks into our tenure, and they're already saying it's not a matter of if she will have to go, but when she will go. That's quite a thing. Just 6 weeks, and it's quite a thing there. Interesting as it is in the old mother country. You know, when you do this political science thing and they tell you about these stable democracies and the third world being unstable and so on, oh boy, we are seeing all kinds of instability there in England. Interesting. Sparrow sang London Bridge is falling down. Seems as though London Bridge is falling down again. They don't seem to have anything right there. I think today I was reading somewhere that the Prime Minister has a 90% disapproval rate, the latest polling. That's bizarre. That's bizarre. But we are watching. Good evening to you, and welcome to Politics 101. Those of you who join us from Brooklyn, good evening, Denise. You're joining us from Washington, D.C. We have quite a following there. Of course, that's somewhere that I know quite well, having lived there for 12 years or so. Welcome to Politics 101. People who are joining us from New Jersey, the metro area there. Welcome to Politics 101. You're joining us from French Guyana. We do have lots of viewers from French Guyana. From Suriname, welcome to Politics 101. Tonight, we are going to be hitting some topics. We're going to be starting off with that how should I put it? The saga, the BV Triumph saga. John Fernandez, the whole land business. The thing has now become national, and I think it may be reflecting something bigger than just what's happening there in BV Triumph. It's not very often that BV Triumph gets into the news. We always say on the East Coast that's the quiet village, you know, but there's nothing quiet about what's happening there. So we're going to be discussing that tonight. We're going to be discussing this whole issue of the opposition now coming out of the shadows, if you will, and talking about renegotiation of the oil contract. That's quite interesting. You know, they've been hedging. The government has been hedging. Nobody wants to hit it. Ramjatan was on here last week, and he said his party has gone that route because they felt that there is much more takings now from the oil, more than they predicted. I remember Clive Thomas predicting that there was going to be more take-ins than they were letting on. And a lot of the local analysts said he was wrong. And the AFC is now saying the Stabrook block and so forth is now poised to bring in much more revenue. And that is an important basis upon which to go back to the table. Our guests tonight are, of course, our usual panel, Dr. Jeffrey and GHK Lall, who are here every other Tuesday. They're going to help us make sense of that. Aubrey Norton has always been there and thereabouts when it comes to the thing, not sticking his neck out, but not saying no. So we are going to be talking about that. The Harbor Bridge, that accident has turned into a little bit more. I understand that among other things, some government minister was blaming Rickford Burke and myself for inciting people to go and sabotage the Harbor Bridge. We are hearing about corruption there and all kinds of things. In Guyana, it never stops. So we're going to touch on that. You know, ITPAD G and the government had been at it. The government asking ITPAD G to turn their books over, which they did. And now the government has drastically reduced the subvention to ITPAD G. And you're asking yourself, here is a government saying, look, we are not practicing apartheid. We are not discriminating against African Guyanese. And here, an African Guyanese organization with a mandate that arises out of a United Nations resolution, and the government is taking away a subvention from them. I'm saying that you're not. I don't understand at one level. Maybe at another level, I understand. And maybe our two guests tonight will help me understand. So please share the link. Welcome to Tuesday edition of Politics 101. Good evening, Cheryl. Cheryl Glenn, my villager. Are you still in Buxton? I envy you. I envy you. I envy you. That's when you retire. That's when you retire. You get to move around more than normal. Good evening, Courtney, and thank you very much for joining us. Let's get straight into the interview. We don't have much time to play with tonight. Good evening, Dr. Jeffrey.
Good evening, my man. How are you?
And Mr. Lall, well, did you know Henry's from BV? Better for Wackton? Henry, GHK, are you hearing me?
I'm hearing you on and off. It's coming over again. You were coming very clearly a moment ago, and now you're distorted.
And what about now?
Yeah, now it's better.
Did you know that Dr. Jeffries from Better for Wackton? He seems to have lost us there again. But I was asking that question because we want to lead off with the land issue there in BV. And since you're from BV, Henry, you will have to take the new ball. What's happening there? What's happening? Why is this issue moved from a little local issue into a national issue?
Well, I believe that it moved into being a national issue largely because you are dealing with a national company. Joint Finance have been around for the longest while, since the 50s. They've had a great reputation. Indeed, the founder was known as Honest John. You know, they have had that great reputation for years. I mean, and of course, they are also, when I was labor and up to today, I think they are one of the best equal opportunity employers in Guyana. They have always been open to all kinds of people working for them and getting up with them and doing that kind of a thing. But the matter got out of hand largely because this company with this kind of reputation and reach essentially has got itself into a situation where it appears as if it wants to take the land of ordinary people. And in the sense that it wanted to purchase some land that the people who were trying to sell it had no authority to sell. The people
that is the NDC.
The NDC. Now, I mean, that must be something of why would an NDC go sell land and not check it out, check out whether or not they had the authority to sell land. And maybe one can say perhaps they did not know. They were hearing about ancestral property and all of that. But they also knew that that land was given over by the Crown to the NDC at certain points of time. And what they may not have known is that the NDC did between the 1950s, late 1950s, and right up to maybe the 1970s, been selling that land to people. And apparently people have transport for all of this land. And so they went about selling people's land. I mean, that itself is more than local. If when an NDC goes about trying to do that, the company, once it was told that the land did not belong to the embassy, to the NDC, and the result, it had no authority to sell. It put out an ad saying that it has no longer have an interest in that land, and it is not, will never be part, as their whole history suggests, that be part of anything wanting to take away the land of poor people and other people, so to speak. And therefore they have no longer have any interest in this matter. And most people would have thought it's over, right? That's the end. But lo and behold, another person, Mr. Mohammed, who seemed to be, I don't know where he is. Nobody seemed to be able to pin him down. They have some addresses and telephone numbers. Nobody answers, or and so on. Seemed to be laying claim to these people's land, and it raises a whole host of questions. You know, when you start from the beginning, you know that the evaluation department may have given them a valuation of $38 million for 130-something acres of land. But any smart person would say to me, the evaluation department, the government department, it always gives low evaluation. It always. When you really want to get market value, you got to go beyond the evaluation department. And if you are selling people's property, and you are selling the villagers' property, at least, if you did not know that that people are transport, you should try to get the best bargain for the village. The first issue that it opens is, why would any sensible person go and try to sell 38 acres of land for evaluation purposes. From that, they give from the estimate given by the evaluation office. Why won't you negotiate for more? It would seem that it is a necessary and sensible thing to do for any manager of people's property, whether or not you are chairman or a board of directors. You're going to go and try to get more for your stakeholders, for your customers. So that apparently was not done. Another, they just decide to sell for, apparently, for what the evaluation office said. Then there's the other question. If you're going to sell things and people raised the issue before the sale took place that people may well own this land. I'm not saying you know that they did, but people are saying people may well own this land. I would have thought that the second issue must be to try, maybe it should be the first, but let's say it's the second issue, must be to try and find out if people own the land. And as it turned out, apparently this land it was being sold since the late 1950s up to the 1971, I think. People have is being sold, and this land is not, apparently it's not owned only by Africans, as people seem to believe. When I saw the list of people who apparently they have title to this land, it would seem, if it's the right list, gotta be very cagey with all these matters. If it's the right list, would suggest like 10-15% of these people are Indians that own this land.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that most of these Indians might have, you remember when we had the problems in the 60s and all that, lots of these people might have gone and forgot that they own that land. They're out of there. And therefore, they are not aware that, even now, the children might not be aware of what is going on. And therefore, that leaves open a lot of other issues that are coming down. But the point is that I've seen a list with people having transport for this property. All right, so that's a couple issues for the village council to deal with. It's not the chairman, it's not anyone. There is the village council made that decision. The chairman might lead it and so on, but this is the village council. So for me, that's an issue. All right, so now you realize this and you go to John Finance and you say, we can't sell, we may have told you, take your money, but apparently we cannot sell you this land. We don't own it. We can't do it. It's impossible for us to do it. And after I heard what John Finance said, wrote in the press, I said it's all over. Because, I told my friends, I said all of them, hey, John Finance, don't operate that. No. If they say it, it is so. But then, to wake the next tie and say here to John Finance said it has passed its interest over to this company. After it was told, my understanding, that these people can't sell this land to you. If a man come to me and say, you cannot sell this land, how can I mean, morally, it's wrong for a start, but it must have all sorts of legal connotations. It must be legally wrong. Because courts are not known to transfer people's property to others unless something very, very, very serious has resulted from their not doing so. Like, but not for just time and all of that. So I'm saying to do that, to pass something over after you know you may not be able to fulfill that request because another man told you he's not, raised a whole host of other questions. I believe that all of these things makes it quite an interesting tale. And that, as you raise it, why has it become national? It become national because of these factors, and it has introduced a whole lot of issues. Just for me, those are important issues. And where the court will go with this, as I said, I believe from my little thing I've done, to say that courts are not going to take away property from one person and give it to another like that if there was not major damage to the other. And as far as I can see, there's no major damage here whatsoever. Then they say, well, Nigel is acting. I don't know if Nigel is acting. And of course, I do not believe that a lawyer, that the need to have a lawyer need to have me as a lawyer. Law is about justice. And if I am a lawyer, I must go seek justice. And if I believe an issue is just, I have a right to say to anybody that comes to me, look, this is unjust. Not because I agree that every citizen has the right to have representation, but it doesn't have to be my representation. I believe law is about justice, seeking justice. It is not justice. In lots of places, the law is not just, but it goes and seek after it. The result is that if I'm a lawyer, I would seek after justice, not under some notion that I need to represent anyone. So there's another issue. So it introduces, if indeed Nigel is part of this, or whosoever else is part of it, doesn't matter if it's Nigel or whosoever. But all I'm saying is that the implications are, people are saying that he should or should not and all that. That's my take on how I would have responded to an issue like that. So, David, you have a little novel here. You can sit down and write a nice you can have GHK.
Well, I'm bringing GHK now because you as the Baronian local boy, I give you the new ball, give you the opportunity to take the new ball. GHK, as you come in, what is intriguing about this story? It seems to have legs beyond triumph.
It's perplexing that the sale of 143.1 acres of land way out there, and excuse me, Dr. Jeffrey, I understand you hail from that area, but way out there could transform into somewhere that is between a mystery and a soap opera. I'm trying to figure out which one it is and which element is more dominant. There's a mystery, there's a thriller. Well, it's not so much of a thriller because I see some trouble ahead. Who is really real here? John Fernand says we don't have an interest in this thing anymore, in this land. We're dealing with some people who are in the shadows and are not coming out of the shadows. We're the sons and daughters, Mohammed's sons and daughters, logging, mining, and so on and so forth. I think there's more to this land other than the right to sell, the authority to sell, and that. Look, John Fernandez is a blue chip. It is a pretty savvy, among the savviest of commercial enterprises in this country. And it would have done its due diligence prior to getting involved. Let's hold off on entangled for a moment. To get involved in a deal of this kind, ancestral lands, private ownership, what the NDC can do and what it can't do, it would have done all that homework. So I find it baffling that it finds itself in this stew. And when I think it is out of it, the company's not really out of it. And I can tell you that that land was not bought or intended to be purchased to establish some fish market or an open air greengrocery or something like that. I think it has a lot to do with storage facilities, and it. I would go so far as to say that it is a part. It is to be utilized. The vision is it for it to be utilized for some downstream oil and gas business. It's a big plot of land and it's well situated, and so it fits whatever bill there is. Now, I who's telling the truth here? Who's telling the full story and the whole story? That's my problem with Guyana, with most things in Guyana. That when you say that this is a routine thing and yeah, you're going to have some disputes about ownership, etc., and we shouldn't trivialize that. But this shouldn't be such an intricate and delicate set of circumstances as it has deteriorated into. So there is more to this, and it has to do with what is the purpose of this land. Yes, market value, I hear that, and that would have been known: past valuation, present valuation, who can sell, who has a right to sell, who is not in the show, and so on and so forth. But the more people talk, or the less that they talk, the more the conjectures, at least in my mind, the more the thinking is stirred that all is not well, which is an understatement. All is not well with this whole land situation, which is now degenerated into a land fiasco. Here's this. Who wants to get out of this? At one time, I thought that John Fernandez was, look, I don't want to have anything to do with this anymore. But the more the matter progresses in the public domain, in the media, I come to a different place in that has it really washed its hands of this, like Pontius Pilate did? I mean, he washed his hands, but he didn't really wash his hands. So it has John Fernandez, and I'm looking at John Fernandez. Has John Fernandez really washed his hands completely and cleanly of this BV triumph matter? And that is up in the air, and I don't like where I am with that. Because if you were to press me for an answer, I would tell you that I think it's not really pulled itself out completely of that, and the reason for that, we will wait to see. In terms of who is Mohammed's sons and daughters, logging, mining, construction, I mean, that's part of this mystery. That's part of this thing that has now taken on proportions that are incredible given how it started, how very low keyed and minute it started. So now we're talking about every day, every time that something develops about this land sale or sale halt in the BV Triumph area involving this acreage, something new is added. And whatever new is added is not wholesome. It is not conducive to bringing this matter to a conclusion that people can look on and say, well, listen, some justice was done here, and that everybody, all the parties to this, walked away feeling good about themselves. I certainly, as an outsider, looking on in this and saying, what is it here that it is that we are missing? And I think it's not just an it, but many things that we are missing here. And it's not to the credit of any of the principles in there. And I'm not going to let the NDC off the hook here. Because at one time I hear about people resigning or not resigning, people The people who should know better are sort of going around in circles. And again, there's a real estate agent. There's a place that is, from what I understand, is un, uh, unattended, meaning it's abandoned, sort of derelict, if I may be excused for using that word. So it represents nothing. So, how does a company with the very, very important name of Mohammed's Sons and Daughters Mining, Logging, Construction end up in such a state of disrepair or begin from a state of such disrepair? Who is a shadow for other shadows? Who is a
Yeah.
front? I think
Yeah.
that's a better way of saying it. Who is a front for fronts that don't want to that wants to be remain in the background? And again, I go back to who has relinquished and who has not, and what is in it for them. In the United States, as you would know, Dr. Hines, we have the WIFM. What is in it for me?
For me.
Right? And I have a feeling that there's a lot of what is in it for me for a lot of people here, including those who are raising up their hands and say, hey, listen, buddy, count me out. They're still in the thing. And that's what adds to the whole controversy, if I may call it that, in this BV Triumph land business. Look, it's a sad thing. You have some, I'm sure, poor people and expectant people caught in this milieu, and they are wondering, well, we thought this was a simple thing. And they were looking forward to collecting something or giving up something that is dear to them. And now they're in limbo and they're wondering if they'll ever extricate themselves out of it. And that's and so all of this, why does everything in this country have to travel down this path, this kind of pathway that brings us to these terrible places for a sale of a piece of land? Yes, it's a big piece of land, and it may have a lot of important things. It certainly has an important history, but why does something like this end up in this place, and kind of put some touches on some people that really ought not to be there? Quite frankly, I would not like to be embroiled in such a situation, either as a buyer, as a seller, or some participant in some way. It just smells, and it's not a good smell.
GHK Lall, commentator, columnist, and thinker. I think more than most of us, he keeps his finger on the pulse on a day-to-day basis. You only have to see his regular writings and musings and comments on the situation in Guyana shows that he has his finger on it. For me, the first question is, why do you want to sell land, ancestral lands, and there are people who are crying out for land and wanting to buy land from the government and house tax. What are you doing in an ancestral village like that, selling land in the first place? That's the thing to me. Second, all right, given what you sold the land for, it's giveaway. Why would you? What's going on? And then, of course, Gabriel, you raised the point there of this thing at the end. Dan Finance, we gone, but now another company come in. What's going on? What's going on here? This thing is mysterious. It is mysterious. Is it a sign of the times? Henry Jeffrey?
Well, it's a sign of the time. Insofar, I believe that if you look, if you just read the newspapers about land dealings in BV, you would have seen that there were all sorts of complaints that the council sell the road to Gafours. Somebody said something like that. And so you hear that, and I go there almost every week. So I hear all of that too. I try to stay out of village politics as much as I can. But you hear all of that too. So it is a sign of a time. Because I would have thought that if you had a proper local government system, and that thing is going around the place about what's taking place at the council and all of that, you would have had opportunities for people to do some kind of investigation. You leave these things to simmer, and you leave them to fester, and then people decide that anything is open to be done. The result is you had local government commission. Why wasn't this brought? These things, indeed, why didn't they see it in the press and ask around and said, gentlemen, what's going on there? Because effectively, we are supposed to keep an eye, not to run your business, not to do, but effectively to see that things are going on in a kind of a universal way throughout the country, so to speak. And we are hoping that this is not the kind of thing. So, yes, it's a sign of the times that most things are broken down. You got to look around. From the police, the things are broken down. And the regime seems to believe that it can operate in this fashion. So that is what has happened. So it's not I bet if you go other places, you'll see the same.
Yes.
I mean, it's not. Any institution that was left to itself, any individual that is left to himself or herself, do what he wants to do. You got to have accountability. This government has no accountability, and it does what it wants to do. So why should the village council do what it wants to do?
Yeah.
I mean, the government is not accountable to anyone. Because of the nature of this system, you want to blame the people, but you can't blame the people when the system allows them. They're not breaking any big laws. They're not breaking any law to speak the government. They're just operating and using the system as it is. And it's the system that is allowing them to do this. So once the system allows you to do this, people do what they want. The government does what it wants. You know, it was cricket carnival. You know, we got 1,000 people coming around in the villages to deal with young men. Yeah, I don't know what to women. After all, it's women who brought these men into the world. But young men and other thing, I hope you're not getting religious here, you know, and things that are untouchable. Because stay home. My thing is that these things are done without anybody. Without without even doing a proper study. What is, man, you're going to be losing all over the village, 1,000 people. Who are they? What are qualified in? Who give, I mean, it's amazing. You said back, which other country, the Caribbean, maybe the world, that this can just happen? But the system allows it.
Allows it, yeah. Good evening to all of you who are joining us on Politics 101. I see some Buxtonian women here. Shelley, good evening. Good evening, Dory, Lynette. Good evening. Welcome to Politics 101. Keep the Buxton posse, keep the Buxton posse visible on Politics 101. Gabriel Ipadji. Subvention from the government has been drastically reduced. Here is a government that is saying we are not discriminating against African Guyanese. In fact, we are being more than fair to African Guyanese. Wouldn't it not have made sense to say, we may have some questions about Ipadji, but we're not going to touch that subvention because the issue of racial marginalization and discrimination is in the air. These people are calling us an apartheid state. Let's don't go there. Are you surprised that the government has gone there? GHK Lall?
Well, I think the best way to answer that question and the straightest way Is there another situation like the IDPADA G organization that is similar in that has a parallel in Guyana? Any demographic, any constituency? And the answer is no. I think what is happening here, and the way that I see it, is that the government is bent on disruption, and from disruption it gets dilution. I see it I see it, and this is being done very overtly in the instance of IDPADA G. You talk about discrimination, you talk about creeping apartheid state, and all the hackles are raised because you're rubbing the fur the wrong way. But when people protest too much, you know that you're hitting some, as you would say, nerve. I would say you're getting close to the substance. And the IDPADA G affair, this drastic reduction of the funding set provided for by law,
Hello.
speaks distinctly and unequivocally to what is happening in Guyana. Here it is, we have a government that is bent on total control and looks at this organization, this African Guyanese organization, and sees a cluster of black Guyanese going there for relief, for counseling, for whatever, and say, we've got a pocket of resistance there. We've got a pocket of people that we need to move away from that mooring. So we are going to undermine it. And the best way to undermine it is to strangle it of funds provided for by law. I think it's reduced by about 90%. Now, how in God's name, excuse me, how in God's name is an organization that you have defunded it almost totally, is going to continue to manage its day to day? How is it going to continue to operate? And I think that's the intention. And so that's the disruption. The disruption is phase one. You go after the leaders, and I heard today that one of the people at IDPADA was a former senior GCOM officer. So I'm saying, oh my, we talk about fraud on the one hand or one side of our mouth, that's the vice president, potential fraud. But really it's the daggers coming out. And it's not so subtle. So there are lots of things at work here and at play here. But the bottom line is that who are the people most impacted by the defunding decision? The people most impacted, it's not Vincent Alexander, it's not Olive Sampson, although they certainly will feel some anguish, considerable anguish, at what has been directed their way and over their stewardship. It has to be the people who go to IDPADA and who look to IDPADA for some sort of succor. And when that is taken away from them, because the organization cannot provide that to them, what is the end game? Where is this leading? Is it that you are reducing a segment of the demographic, of the national demographic, bit by bit, plank by plank, to this state where they come to you because they have no other choice? They give up their dignity and their pride, they subsume that, and they come to you and they say, please help me. Is this where, I think this is where this thing is going, and this is where I see, and excuse me for doing so, I think that's where this credit union fiasco, public service credit fee, this back and forth about elections and online and who is tyrannical and who did what and who didn't do what. I think this is where this is going, because you have a group of people, mainly, almost primarily black people, black Guyanese, and the PPP sits down and say, we can't have that. We don't want that to flourish because it means that the kind of control that we envision, we are not able, going to have to be, we're not going to be able to do that because we cannot put our arms tightly around this. So definitely what I see at work and in motion in the ITPADA situation is a concerted and well thought out effort and a comprehensive one to go after the leaders, to gut the organization, and to reduce it to a state of ineffectiveness. We have a saying in the United States that if you really want to render an institution ineffective, impotent, you take away the money. The US Congress, whether it's a Republican or Democratic Congress, it takes away the funding, it cuts it drastically, and then you reduce it to a shadow of itself. I think this is what is at work here with the ITPADA group, and then there's another sorry and sordid matter in this country. Why is it in this time of oil, upstream, downstream, we've got so much concern about Exxon in our hands, so much that we don't know. We have to depend on the American oil company to tell us, to provide us with intelligence to tell us how we are doing or how we are not doing and what they are doing out there that nobody really knows. And as we see, and excuse me for going off here a little bit, with the US Department of Labor had to come down hard on Exxon and force it to reinstate two scientists for a matter that happened, which the Wall Street Journal put out 2 years ago in September 13, 2020, where these scientists were moved out, fired for blowing the whistle because of falsification of data and inflating them. So, why I bring in the Exxon here, the government has enough on its hands to look at Exxon and said, is it doing right by us? Instead of that, it's going after ITPADA. It's going after ITPADA, a black organization, a predominantly an organization dedicated to black interests, African Guyanese interests, and saying, we want to deal with you and we're going to deal with you this way to neutralize you so that therefore you cannot do what you're doing for your people and therefore we will make them in time beholden to us. I think this is what is stirring here and this is where this is going. You're going to come to us and we're going to help you. You're going to owe us and we'll go from there. That's what I see that is happening here.
Henry Jeffrey, you are the expert here on domination in the sense that you have more than the rest of us. You have been hammering this thing since around 2006, 2007 about domination, not just as tactic, but as strategy. So I would want you to come at this from the whole angle of domination. But you have dealt with Jagan and Burnham close up. What I want to get from you, would a Burnham or a Jagan, if faced with this issue, would they not have said, but this is a sensitive issue? I am not touching that, comrades. Talk to us. First, as I'm saying, the generation before this generation of leaders in dealing with the question of sensitive racial issue. Would Burnham of Jagan would have taken away subvention from the other ethnic group on an issue such as the International Decade, something that is sanctioned by the United Nations?
David, yes, I recognize the issue of dominance. And as well, you put my book up there where I said ethnic dominance in Guyana. And that was since when around 2014, 2013, I wrote, but I was writing things about that for long. The idea of the PPP is a simple one. It wants ethnic dominance in Guyana. It grew out of a thing that says that at one time, well, it's not said. At one time, it had the ethnic majority. And it believes that unless it keeps that the government in its grasp, India would not be, it tells itself that Indians will not be secured in Guyana. And therefore, it's its job to do whatsoever it could to stay in office. It does not mind now if it is manipulating election, which it is. For the first time in Ghana electoral history, we all know Burnham used to make jokes about his manipulation of election. I sat at QC in a regional labor conference when Burnham was giving them a joke about it's not who vote, it's who counting the votes and all of that. So when you say Burnham never messed, I mean, he would not have his supporters say it, but he said it there. That, you know, the PPP wants ethnic dominance, and they've convinced their supporters that unless they are many of their supporters, most of them, that unless they are in control of the government of this country, they are going to be in jeopardy. And so that is it. They want build one Guyana, but they want it alone. That's that. They want it alone. They don't. It's almost a contradiction in terms. One Guyana is a political thing. It's a political construct, and half the people are different ethnicity, more than half. No. So you can't build one Guyana alone, but they want to build one Guyana alone. So they think if they bring carnival and all this, and they're going to win over some people, and those who they can't win over, that would have to come and beg them, and they can join the PPP. Didn't I? I think I said it on your program. If it was true, and it appears it was true, Bishop Edgell was in Georgetown telling people that, oh, if you want your roads and things done, drains and so, you got to join the PPP. I mean, what is that? Is whose taxes are doing this kind of a thing? So there is no question in my mind that when they see what they are actually doing, apology, they recognize that this is quite a few people that are walking around all over the country, maybe carrying a different viewpoint from the viewpoint that they want to carry. So they decide that they can take away all its grant and then get, I don't know if they're going to find 1,000, but 1,000 of their own propagandist acolytes from the army, whatsoever they got them, and send them out. Because they are now going to make all these black people feel that they are for black people and the PNC is not. Never mind that this organization give them all the books they got. They demonstrated. I was waiting to see. I thought they knew something about this organization that I did not know. But this organization opened their books to them. And when they found nothing, they still give them nothing because they shouldn't be on the ground. You cannot have an African organization on the ground contradicting what they perceive that they will be contradicting. And for the most part, they will be contradicting the one Guyana thing that the PPP wants to make alone. The PPP can sit down as long as it likes and tell every single Guyanese as long who wants to buy that they are not racist and all that. Fine, you're not racist. Like in Kosovo, do an ethnic audit. Demonstrate where the wealth is going to the people. It's you who want to build one Guyana. That would help you. That would drive it. Show the people where this wealth that you are distributing is actually going. Do an ethnic audit. Show where it's going. Show if it's not going equitable, what policies you have in place or will put in place to make things more equitable. Do that kind of thing. In Kosovo, the West themselves, America, Britain, France, they themselves design a constitution with those features for the minorities in there. So this is not, I'm not asking for something new. You're not racist? Fine. Show us. Don't just run around and like you talk about the elections. Look how the votes move from this one to which votes when everybody rigging elections for the last umpteen years. Those margins of votes are not real. You're gonna look at them when you see the amount of skullduggery that went on in 20 election. It was said, oh, there was only a small movement. You gotta be a joker. The margins have not been real in Ghana elections since ever when. The first stop for any election must be a clean list. You can't come with a dirty list and then say, oh, look, there's thief from the list. This is Ghana. These are people. It happened in Moldova. Same amount, about 5,000 people in the election had to be voted that were not supposed to vote. Moldova, I think so. That were not supposed to vote. So this man, you can't leave it open, man. All of us know people. Stricter the government, wiser the population. And then, your mother used to tell you this since you're little like this. You're gonna leave it open. In 1992, the electoral list was about 742,000. And the population was 742,000. I think I'd said this before. And the electoral list was about 360,000. Today, the population is about 380,000. And the electoral list is 600 and something thousand. And you are doing that, and don't tell me you can leave open space for all sorts of bandits to get involved and do it. And lo and behold, 2020 election, for the first time in Guyanese history, demonstrated quite clearly. Regardless of what Mingo might have done, if you didn't do it, you might never have known. But the point is, demonstrated clearly that the PPP has been in its constituency. Maybe it's not the PPP, maybe it's some of their friends and things. But whatsoever, it's in its constituency.
Benefits them. And
that about the fraud being going on. If it wasn't fraud, why they are trying to stop it from going before the courts? If it wasn't fraud, why are they doing the absurdity again of trying to set up their commission, handpicked commission, to deal with things that has to do with them? They're setting up their own courts to judge them. I mean, this is so absurd. I don't know how people can really sit down. Nobody believes it, of course. It's only 22% of the people believe that the government represented electoral government. So nobody believes it. Not even their own supporters believe it. But they do it. They do these things. So I understand. I know what they're trying to do. They want to stay in power. They don't want help from nobody. The PNC or nobody. When they do this, they must demonstrate that it's they alone are doing this. The truth of the matter is that even if they succeed in winning 2 or 3 seats, everybody would have sit down and said, what they are doing now, they have already made if they win it, already made the election illegitimate. They are using state power willy-nilly to win election. That's illegitimate. That's not democracy. Democracy is not just people putting numbers in boxes. It's how it's done. They're running around using the state authority to do all carnival. Up to now, you know what a carnival costs? You know what a carnival costs? But the people are doing these things. And so they let elections, if they win it, already illegitimate. Because how they want it. They take people money and they're spending it to win election. Clearly, blatantly. There's no long-term, any distance in any of the things they are doing. This is nonsensical. Totally nonsensical. So that's where you are in Guyana at this point.
That's where we are in Guyana at this point. And Lord, when you think that we may have reached the end of the rope, you wake up the next day and something more ridiculous. Why would you want to antagonize, even if it's 10%, 5% of the African Guyanese population at this time, at this delicate moment? Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to do that? GHK, what's happening at the Harbor Bridge?
Well, according to the bishop, the Minister of Public Works, we're going to spend $1 billion. And I'll tell you, how you can do that in 3 days, in less than a week, that boggles the mind. That certainly, look, extensive damage was done to the bridge. What nobody's talking about is that a Guyanese supervisor was injured and has suffered a broken leg. Now, I hope that some provision is going to be made for him beside NIS. We hear about this Panamanian vessel and captain's supposed to be them. I'm focusing on the money. The bishop said, the Honorable Minister, Bishop Edgehill, I don't know if he was speaking politically or he was wearing the cloth at that moment. He said, it's $1 billion. But the work is far from finished. So if the work is far from finished and we have spent $1 billion or about to spend $1 billion, then I shudder to think whether we'll have a final bill of 2.5 or $3 billion when this thing is done. So the question, the issue for me is that there's even something like this, an accident, a serious accident. Tens of thousands of commuters have been disrupted on a daily basis. And we seize every opportunity. The PPP government seizes every opportunity to inflate estimates, inflate expenses, to use these situations as cover and say, look, we've got the bridge working, and everybody applauds. A good thing. And we've got it working because we did 24/7, and we did this non-stop and without sleep and yeoman effort. Fine. Nobody's taken away anything from that, from those folks, and we thank them and we applaud them. But how do you arrive at $1 billion? How do you arrive at $1 billion and counting? And this is what is mind-boggling to me. And when you have, I think, a ton of expenses still to come, we are not even talking about penalties yet. We're talking about sheer damage to the infrastructure, the physical bridge. We're not talking anything about penalties and fines, and I don't want to hear about people being banned. That means nothing. That means nothing to me. We need to hear this Panamanian company, whatever it is, to be fined $100 million, maybe $200 million for our inconveniences, for our pain, our suffering. Because when our people have to travel with the boats, the speedboat, and work with all these overnight developments in their lives, there's a cost to that, and somebody should pay for that. Going back to the bishop himself, all I hear and all I see is $1 billion. And when I hear $1 billion in the mouth of a PPP person, I straighten up and I stiffen, because I know the worst is yet to come. And I know the fix is in. Because just like how they're using these infrastructure projects, billions here and billions there, it's the best cover that you can find. You see what we are doing for you, but underneath of that, it's all the worms. Underneath, it's all the worms, and the worms are feasting on the dollars that are really ours, taxpayers' dollars. And what value are we getting from them? The value we're getting from the bridge, we have light traffic back and forth. That's a good thing. The, the underbelly, the other side of it, is what the cost that we have to pay. A government is holding us by ransom, and it is using these situations to extract and to exact tribute from the population. That's where I am with the Harbor Bridge.
Henry Jeffrey, anything on the Arbor Bridge? And while you're at it, the AFC and to some extent the PNC, but more the AFC saying they're ready to sit down with the PPP and for them to go and sit down with Exxon and renegotiate the contract. Is that news?
I went to the market. I went to the market to buy pepper, and this stall holder who normally speak, tell me about politics and all that and what's going on. And then she says, you're here? I said, no, I haven't heard. She said, no. Are you cross the bridge to get knocked out? I said, are you? What am I going to do with you? Well, obviously, because this starts, I'm thinking, she think, is the PNC sabotage the bridge? I said, really? I said, wow, the PNC sabotage this bridge. What happened? She said, well, I was in the market, and that is the talk, is the PNC, like they pay the man, the one who got to direct them into the river and thing, and he just run into the bridge. I said, but these people got a whole lot of signals, you can see where they're going. Anyway, the point is, I mean, somebody put that in the public domain.
Yes.
Somebody, and I doubt if it's the PNC who put that in the public.
It's a government minister. A government minister put that in the public domain.
Somebody put it in it. That I didn't know until you mentioned just now that that's how it is public domain. But then I didn't bother because I realized that all sorts of madness has been going on around that institute, around that bridge. But when I saw the the $1 billion thing, I said, well, you see, I didn't take this. I see that this ship and all this must be insured, right? And when they do accident, the thing is insured. Maybe somebody see a scam here, because you can now cost anything and send to the insurance. You understand? It's not necessarily only guidees. You can cost what you like and send to the insurance 2 billion, 3 billion, whatever you like. So I said, this is, I mean, I know this happens. So, I mean, I said, perhaps that's what's going on here. But and I'm saying, somebody will get up in Parliament and say they want a detailed statement about this $1 billion and whatsoever. What precisely was meant when the statement was made that $1 billion was spent? What precisely was meant? Is it already spent? It is to be spent? Precisely what? And then you want a clear statement about how much. You want it in like accountant form to show how much this is. And somebody should do it. You go ask the committee in Parliament and let the people say, we ain't giving you any. Or we don't care. Go away. They can do that. That's what I mean. Somebody should do it. My position, that's my take on this bridge issue, because I'm not quite clear. Anytime I have that kind of money too, I can say, but I don't know. But I'm saying all of these are the formulations that I get into. In terms of Aubrey saying, I read what Aubrey said after you sent me this thing says, I said, I'm not seeing this in the mainstream press. But that's another thing. Aubrey made that statement. I think the mainstream press, well, I read one mainstream press. I don't go reading all of them. And I have not seen it. I might have missed it, but I have not seen it. Now, I will thought after he has been balking and saying anything, and people been saying, say so, that might have be the headline. Yeah, and see, prepared to think. But then, that should have been the press. That should have been a headline in a mainstream press. And that's why when people say to me that when they ask, oh, what they wear, look, the PPP is all over the place and doing all kinds of things. I said, oh, you know that. You know that because of the press. And they are, even the United States State Department in the report on things says they have more or less domination of the press. So you're going to see them doing things. But what do they accomplish by doing these things? You used to see the leader of the opposition, Mr. Jack, he used to be there talking all the time. But what did he accomplish? Did he stop Granger from doing anything for all them years? The only thing he accomplished is Sharon Das. Truly, was he able to stop David Granger from doing anything Granger wanted to do for the time they were in office? No. It's the system. The system is like that. The question then, for me, we have to seriously think about what it is that we want in Guyana. We have to do that. We just can't, just put everything and throw it under the bridge and want every so often to come back and talk about politics like if we have a good system. We do not have a good system. We need to get a proper system in place. I don't want to blame anybody here for anything. What I want to say quite clearly, the system needs to change, and we need to change it now.
The system needs to change, and we need to change it now. GHK, Lall, you have the last word. This renegotiating the oil contract.
When the PPP was in opposition, it was very adamant. It was very vehement that the contract was a terrible thing. It put it in its better contract administration. And when they came into power, the president himself said, look, we've got a bad deal here. And some of the ranking PPP members, ministers, I think including the Attorney General and the money man, Dr. Singh, went on record as saying this is a crime and this is this and it is that. And all the negatives and the worst terms that you can think about. Now that the PPP controls the levers of power, and when the word renegotiation comes up, it is balking. It puts up a wall. It makes all kinds of excuse. And look, my context is 20 years in the investment community on Wall Street at different levels. I don't want to hear my leader, whether it's Aubrey Norton or the vice president or the president, telling me and this country about the risk of the investor. That's a given. And the return that should be commensurate with that risk. That's not the role of a national leader who has given himself the title of chief oil minister. He has to be concerned with our welfare, our interests. And because the contract is what it is, and it says clearly, as the opposition leader is now saying, which David Patterson didn't flesh it out, but he certainly used the word that we need to go after this contract. And that's what the AFC came out fully and said, and the other group, Article 13, and other civil society presences. This contract needs to be looked at because when it was signed, we had 1.1 billion barrels of oil discovered, according to Exxon. This is what Dr. Vincent Adams, a man who I know and who I trust as being credible. Now we have 10 billion barrels more. So this thing gone up by 1,000% or 10 times as much as we had. So come on. The circumstances have changed, and as much as I hear about sanctity of contract, I also think that the time is past. It's not ripe. It's past. It's force ripe, or wherever we discard it, that for this contract to be renegotiated. Here is my thing from a social, environmental, and political perspectives. The PNC want it. They call it, well, if you want to call it renegotiation, be my guest. But the contract allows for change. So there is that. The AFC want it. The other civil society groups wants it. So then who is the one that is standing against it? It seems to me by the process of elimination, all you've got left is the PPP, the government, the ruling power of the day saying, well, we got to think about this and we got to look at this again and it don't work. So, well, here's this. Real politics will tell me if I am the leader that, listen, I could sit down and have the kind of conversation with my people is when you see them people go up on the road there with a little picket and thing in front of the EPA office or Exxon office, wherever there in Hatfield Street or somewhere, or the US Embassy. My fellow Americans might be very unhappy with me with this. You go and join them. And then when he sits across from Mr. Alistair Routledge, he tells him, the vice president tells him, I can't manage the people. They want more money. They want what is better for Guyana because they feel that they have been cheated. They have been wronged. And you know what they say about hell hath no fury about and all of the other thing. This is where I think if the PPP really wants more money and better for Guyanese, for this country, it will not prostrate itself so much before Exxon. It will not kowtow as much. And it will say, look, I can't hold back them people. But it will take a lot of guts and some other part of the anatomy that we can't mention on this program for the vice president and the president and all the others to do that in the PPP government. And quite frankly, sir, I do not think that they have it. Not when they're dealing with the white man, not that they're dealing with the foreigners, not when they owe so much to the Americans for being where they are post 2020. So, as far as I see, the Exxon contract stays as is, as much as I want it to change, as much as Guyanese would want it to change. And I think that the opposition is in a good place because you can say, look, we want better for you. You're not public servants. You're not getting anything. Policemen and army people and nurses and teachers and whatever, you're crying and you're feeling the cost of living that is running away from you. And we can get this royalties and better profit sharing, windfall taxes. But how do we define that here? We can be in a position to have more in our coffers to share more with you. So it seems that the only obstacle in the way of renegotiation right now is the People's Progressive Party / something else, whatever that is.
GHK, Lall, Henry, Jeffrey, gentlemen, thanks again for coming through. You've certainly enriched the discussion. You've shed light on a number of issues, and you've helped us to understand some of this mystery that is happening in our country. Thanks again for coming through. And I'll see you guys in 2 weeks' time. Tomorrow night, I'm going to have Rickford Burke on. We've been trying to get Rickford, but he has to work out with his lawyers and so on. But Rickford Burke is going to be on tonight. And then on Thursday, I'm going to try to get somebody from the BV Council to come on and to talk about this land thing that we talked about tonight. But tomorrow night, Rickford Burke coming here to speak to the recent harassment that he has been going through at the hands of the PPP. And of course, tomorrow morning, those of you who are who tune into the Buxtonian Morning Time, it's Wednesday morning. And so I'll be on tomorrow morning as soon as Board Wife Week. I can't come on before God, Board Wife Week, but as soon as Board Wife Week, I'll be on Buxtonian Morning Time. See you all tomorrow morning, and certainly tomorrow, Rickford Burke will be here for our midweek edition of Politics 101.